Yes, this is the classic arcade game to beat all classic arcade games. But did you know that Namco, the makers of Pac Man, when they made the game, didn't actually know how the game ended? And yes, for those asking, there is an official end to the game Pac Man. Hello! Welcome to Brainspill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and we are going to be diving into some retro gaming today. Pac Man, the 1980s maze action video game, was released by Namco for arcade machines and was originally called Pac Man in Japan, but was changed to the name Pac Man for international release for the sole reason that if they kept the name Pac Man, changing one letter might be very unfortunate for Western audiences. That was probably a good idea in hindsight, and I think Pac Man has a good ring to it. The whole purpose of the game, for the very few people that have never played this game, is that you control a yellow dot in a maze, and you control that yellow dot, called Pac Man, to go and collect pellets and avoid ghosts who are trying to kill you at every turn. However, you can turn the tables on these ghosts by picking up the power pellets. When they turn blue and run away in fear at your massive Pac Man mouth, that will literally eat them alive. So, what happens when you collect all the pellets on the screen? Well, the level resets, and you go again. But the ghosts get increasingly faster, making the game basically a war of attrition. You keep going for as long as possible, try and get the highest score you can, and when you eventually run out of lives, you'll end with your final score. A score that will be placed on a leaderboard, so you can show how fantastic you are at Pac Man, or how many hours you've wasted on this arcade game. And that was really about it. I mean, games at this time, they didn't have a lot of memory to put into these machines. And it was down to this lack of memory which limited games in their capacity, meaning that many arcade games at the time were focused more so on trying to get the highest score possible so you could do the same thing over and over again. That's right, there was no narrative or end goal programmed into the game. It was a matter that it would get progressively harder until the player eventually died. The programming was there, but limited in many ways, such as how the ghosts move, to which, if you didn't know, isn't completely random. Well, okay, maybe for the orange ghost it was. He moves around randomly. But the other three work together to try and trick the player. Blinky, the red ghost, literally chases you down around the maze, preventing you from staying in the same spot for too long. Pinky, the obviously pink ghost, strategically attempts to ambush the player from the front, and the last is Inky, the cyan-coloured ghost, who is programmed to try and force the player into making a wrong move. Whilst he doesn't come from you in most instances, the ghost moves in such a way to try and scare the player into an unfavourable position. This itself is actually really interesting, and it's these little things they add in just to give the game more difficulty. So basically Namco just needed to make the game as difficult as possible to make it where they didn't have to even know what the ending was, because of the fact that, well, they make it so difficult no one will ever get there. Right? So, if the game ever had an end point, what would happen? Do you just keep going indefinitely? Do you reach the highest possible number that the game is programmed to do? Well, the answer to that is no. Because the game literally breaks before you can even reach that stage. There is technically an end, but it was never intended by Namco. The game was so difficult that nobody had ever reached the highest possible level. Not the developers at Namco or anyone playing the game in an arcade, as far as we're aware. But the first reported case of someone actually reaching the very end of the game, or quote, the final level in Pac Man, was beaten by a man called Billy Mitchell, video game player of the century. Billy Mitchell has gone on record in the past in interviews explaining that he has become a professional in Pong and Donkey Kong and then eventually making his way to Pac Man, conquering the classic arcade games only to see if he can beat them, and Pac Man was no exception. He explained that by level 21, the Pac Man game reaches the maximum difficulty, and to reach the final level, it takes anywhere between 4 to 5 hours of perfect play. So, what happens when you reach the final level? By level 256, there is simply not enough memory left in the game to load half the board, leaving the other half a scrambled mess of digits, numbers, and assets. What the hell is this? Is this a game? I don't even know at this point. At this point, you can keep playing the level. You can go around on the screen and collect as many dots as you can, but given the fact that only half the level's loaded in, you can't complete the level, where eventually you will die, and that's it. There's no way to progress further, and at that point you have got the highest score possible without the game breaking, basically. In order to have a perfect game of Pac Man, the highest score you can possibly achieve is 3,333,360 points. This leads to the official end of Pac Man, due to the fact that the game simply breaks and you cannot progress any further. The programmers of the game didn't know how long the game could run for before it ran out of memory, nor was anyone crazy enough to even attempt this. In all honesty, Namco probably didn't even think anyone would even be able to get to this point, let alone try. But there are people out there who will do the impossible to prove anybody wrong. And this is what Billy Mitchell was banking on. He said that he was the first person to reach the end of the game, to get a perfect score, and as a result sent the evidence off to Namco, who were pretty impressed by the fact that they'd managed to, quote unquote, beat Pac Man. Mitchell sent the evidence to Namco proving that he beat the game, and they invited him to the Tokyo Game Show and presented a plaque to him, naming him the video game player of the century. This man, Billy Mitchell, video game player of the century, has been called into question about the legitimacy of his achievements. I'm not saying that the guy cheated, but these are allegations raised against him. Yep, that's right, no lawsuits here, Billy Mitchell. This is all allegations. As a matter of fact, there were so many allegations brought against him that Billy Mitchell used to own a website called perfectpacman.com, where he would basically display his achievements. However, he has since let the website lapse, and someone else has now taken over the same domain name, but instead has changed the content on the page to publish articles and evidence as part of an investigation into the legitimacy of Billy Mitchell's previous accomplishments, in particular that of the world record Pac Man scores. The reason for this was the fact that people were suggesting that Billy Mitchell may have used an emulator to actually play the game and cheat his way to the end without legitimately playing for the 4 to 5 hours that he claims is required of perfect gameplay. These allegations came in the form that stated that Billy Mitchell needed to play the game on an actual arcade machine, because then there is really no argument over the fact he'd done it legitimately. Using an emulator which could modify the game does certainly raise a lot of questions, to which the Guinness World Records and Twin Galaxies, the popular gaming leaderboard site, stripped Mitchell of his accolades due to the fact that the allegations and evidence produced were highlighting a number of past achievements, such as his scores in Donkey Kong as well as Pac Man. There is a question over if it can be independently verified that the attempt to reach the end of Pac Man was done by legitimate means. If it could be altered using an emulator, then perhaps there's things that we may need to dig into deeper to actually be able to say for certain whether this was legitimate. So let's just say that ongoing legal talks have since made the Guinness Book of World Records reinstate the achievement, but at that point we don't really know what's going on from there. That's kind of where we are with everything. Yes, whilst Billy Mitchell's claimed he's got all of these achievements and that he's found the end of the game, he could be right or he could be wrong. I guess we just don't know. But there are certainly a number of investigations going on at the moment to try and find out exactly what happened. One thing we do know is that, yes, there is a definitive end to the game Pac Man. As to how we found that out, that's up for debate. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. You want a bonus fact? Garrett Bobby Ferguson, the giant bearded floating head on that episode of Regular Show, looks awfully familiar, right? Well, Cartoon Network were previously sued by, you guessed it, Billy Mitchell, probably because of the fact that they claimed this character that kind of had similarities to Billy Mitchell was accused of cheating in the show. As you might expect, the suit was dismissed, but that just kind of goes to show the kind of person we're dealing with, and the fact that everything I've said in this video is factually correct, and anything that happens in regards to the allegations that have been raised are just allegations. So yeah, put that in your pipe and smoke it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.